Open Market is sponsored by AdLib, the self-serve DSP solution making advertising easy. What do the world's largest demand-side platforms have in common? They're effective, but they require large annual contracts and spend minimums. With AdLib, growing agencies get a single platform that connects to every top global DSP with no contracts, no spend minimums, and G2's #1 ranked support. That means access to the entire universe of TV, digital out-of-home, audio, display, video, and native without a hassle and with no blind spots. It's incredibly easy to use, plus it can automate most of the work your team spends hours a day doing manually. Get the most powerful media buying technology without the barriers to entry. Check out AdLib at getadlib.com today.
Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I'm Joe Zappa, and I'm joined by Eric Franchi and the founder of Performance TV, Jason Fairchild. What's up, Jason?
Hey, glad to be here.
The founder of tvScientific and the inventor of Performance TV, I think.
Well, I just upgraded him. I said he founded an entire category that's going to be, hundreds of billions of dollars. Don't mind me. One company is great, a category is even better.
Yes.
In the spirit of no conflict, no interest, my fund Imperium is a investor in tvScientific, and I'm a big fan of Jason. So we should put that out there.
Yes, and tvScientific is, as of recently, a client of mine. So we are conflicted as F, but, as Eric said, if you're not conflicted, you don't know enough to be relevant. So here we are.
A grand tradition of Google ad tech.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jason, you were a co-founder of OpenX. You were there for over a decade. I want to start there briefly before we get into tvScientific and Performance TV. So, when you look back at over a decade at OpenX, what are some of the biggest lessons you took from that and that you maybe took into your next venture?
Well, so many of them. It was such an awesome experience. I think the first one is, I forget the exact terminology of Mike Tyson's famous quote, but you have a battle plan. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So what happened to us was, we raised a bunch of money, and then around this idea that the open source ad server would be the foundation to acquire a bunch of paying customers on the enterprise side, and then we'd add on the ad exchange to that. And what we learned within 3 months was that really none of the ad serving customers, the open source ad serving customers, either could be reached or had any interest in sort of upgrading to a more enterprise version. So we had to pivot really early, right during the financial crisis fallout. The second lesson or series of lessons is really just scaling a business from zero revenue to many hundreds of millions, close to $1 billion actually. And just all the things that go into that, from international expansion to, setting up the revenue and product organizations and support organizations and sort of bringing in new team members for each chapter of the growth. Those are all just really important lessons. And the paid search company, Overture, I was a vice president, but it's just different when you're building it from scratch. So getting to see it really twice, once at Overture and then doing it at OpenX was just great experience. And I wasn't the CEO at OpenX, but in a lot of ways, I got a 10-year apprenticeship. I got to be in all the board meetings, all the exec team meetings.
So you were the CRO at OpenX, right?
Yep.
What are some of the main things that you had to learn through that apprenticeship about being a CEO that were incremental to what you were doing or what you knew as a CRO?
Honestly, it's so many little things. It's, dealing with HR issues to, how you think about hiring, how you go about hiring and attracting top talent, how you build and manage an office in Japan, for example. Those things don't come natural to folks. And, just getting to do it. And just like anything else, you make mistakes and you learn through those mistakes. A lot of that, board prep, company meeting prep, the operating cadence of an early startup through, a 500 or 600 person company, and how that evolves over time is, just incredible lesson.
And you mentioned a shift from, I think you were talking about open source ad server to, SSP/ad exchange. Did that sort of happen organically, or was there some sort of single decisive moment where, as the leaders of the company, you had to be like, this initial vision isn't going to pan out and we need to do something significantly different?
Well, we had always had the ad exchange vision, but what had changed was the belief that the ad server, the foundational ad server, would fuel that ad exchange. That was a key pivot when we realized that that wasn't going to happen. And largely, we realized that because of Google. About that same time, DFP was acquired and AdX was announced. And the bundling of those two things happened where it became clear that our ad server wouldn't scale. And then B, it also became clear we had to build the exchange brick by brick, supply partner by supply partner, demand partner by demand partner. And that was further complicated by once we launched OpenRTB, Google was pretty rigid, let's say, mandating that if they use DFP, they must use AdX and vice versa, and they couldn't use any third-party demand. So those dynamics playing out in the market created, obviously lots of difficulty on the ad server side. It's impossible to sell an ad server against Google when, if you do that, they can't access Google demand, the largest pool of demand on the internet. So it was difficult, required innovation, which ultimately led to header bidding, which we pioneered as a way around that. So these were challenging problems, I would say seemingly insurmountable. And then you also learn that in the face of a monopolistic opponent that has 90% market share, there is a way. And I think that's an incredible lesson for us all to take with us when whatever we do. Going through that was difficult, but also incredibly valuable.
And then in 2020, you started tvScientific. I think you had left OpenX a year or two before. Why did you want to go into CTV specifically?
The OpenX thing was incredible. We'd actually been looking for my replacement for a few years because I'd travel 200 days a year, and it just takes its toll. So I wanted to just spend some time on the beach. And as a part of that, I went to the NAB, National Association of Broadcasters convention in Las Vegas, and really just to learn about CTV in particular, streaming in particular. And I saw some demonstrations there. I want to say it was Alfonso or one of those companies back in the day. And I was looking at just the reporting capability, and it just struck me that it's remarkably digital-esque, which from the floor, I called Bill Gross and said, if we can close the loop between an ad exposure and an outcome, a purchase, kind of like we did back in the day at paid search, am I crazy? Like, what if we did for TV what we did for paid search back in the late 1998 period?
Just for those unfamiliar, Bill Gross was founder of, I think, GoTo, which became Overture, right, for a search engine, which is where you got your start in digital marketing. So you've had this very interesting career: search, then programmatic, then CTV. So just for the audience that's not familiar with Bill, that's where that connection came from. And then he went on to start what I think might have been the first incubator or accelerator, which was, I think still is, Idea Lab, yeah?
Yep. Idea Lab actually was started before GoTo. GoTo.com was one of the initial, call it 50 companies that incubator launched in 1998, just by luck of the draw, ended up on that company heading up business development. So fast forward, I called him from the show floor, and that began a dialogue and a research period around, hey, can you stitch together technologies that can connect the dots between a TV ad viewed and a purchase? That research led to the founding of the company, and Bill Gross and Idea Lab were Bill's a co-founder, and they were an initial seed investor back a few years ago.
That's when we reconnected. We were talking about the idea behind the company and the investment opportunity. And I've told this story on a previous pod. The thing that struck me about the initial conversation and your initial vision for tvScientific was it was completely different than anyone else who was pitching, a CTV opportunity at the time to us. The narrative at the time was, hey, there is an inevitable wall of 70 billion, linear TV dollars that are going to come into CTV because of cord cutting and better technology and yada, yada, yada. And your pitch, I'm paraphrasing, and it's been 5 years, was something to the effect of, yeah, cool, but what if that number is wildly wrong and the real opportunity is search and social dollars, which means that the CTV thing could be, an order of 2 or 3x larger than anybody thinks. And from an investor perspective, you look for ideas like that, and people that, can even be crazy enough to come up with ideas like that, which is what got, us excited about tvScientific.
Well, it's funny. We talked about pivoting a couple of times at OpenX. Since the very moment of that first conversation, the first conversation started with the founder of paid search that led to the founding of the company. So always consistently, it's about how do you unlock and help transition the paid search and social advertisers over to TV and let them buy and measure the same way they buy and measure search and social, which is a massive opportunity. And interestingly, because you said it, the dollars are going to move over from linear TV to programmatic TV or CTV. We're not really even going after those yet. Those are brand dollars, and they generally speaking don't care about performance, largely because they don't know it's available. We'll get to that, but the core focus is on a much bigger TAM, which is the multiple hundreds of millions of dollars that flow into search and social.
I think there's also something to be said for the fact that like the tvScientific pitch is so compelling because it hits like both an immediate opportunity and then also this like much bigger visionary opportunity, right? So the immediate opportunity is like, well, look, we all understand that like linear is still a $60 billion market, CTV is like 30, 35 billion, and like those dollars will move over, and that will be a rising tide that lifts all boats for all companies that are in CTV. So that's great. You have like the baseline. We know CTV is like the fastest growing advertising channel. You are going to get dollars from linear, so that's good. But you are like the one company leading the charge at bringing in this much more massive opportunity. So what I like about it is that like for the cynics who are like always sort of skeptical of like the visionary opportunity, like you still have that more tangible, immediate opportunity. You're playing in like the best space in digital advertising to be playing in, which is CTV, but also you're going after this like generational ad tech opportunity.
What you said, yes.
So like you call Bill, you're talking about like, what if we could do what has been done for paid search and social for TV? I guess his response was like, yeah, that's very interesting. But then of course the question becomes, how do you do it? So at a reasonably high level, how do you do it? How do you make that possible on TV?
Well, without getting too technical, we leverage existing programmatic pipes and technologies, device graphing, for example, to deterministically map we'll just call it an ad exposure and create an ad exposure file. So what that means is when we get a bid request for a certain household TV ad, we get the IP address, we get a bunch of device ID information, we get a bunch of other user agent stuff. And then with that, we understand other devices that are connected to that TV in that household, all maps to what we refer to as a household ID, which is mapped further to the physical address. So in this way, we can build an ad exposure file, so household and the devices in that household that have been exposed to a Domino's pizza ad, for example. We then work with the advertiser, just like Google and Facebook, to instrument their website with a pixel or their app with a postback. So anytime there's an outcome, we measure it, we see it, we count it. And then what we do is we basically look for a direct connection, a direct match between an ad exposure and an outcome based on the household ID. And that's a deterministic match. Maybe it's a 97% probability. And then now you got to figure out how much credit to give TV versus a last click channel. I would say this is the core bit of it where we're different, and it's also the key challenge. Because the average use case is I'm going to see a Domino's pizza ad. I'm going to pick up my phone or a gaming ad or whatever ad for whatever product. I'm going to pick up my phone, and whether it's right then while I'm watching TV or 15 minutes later or the next day, I'm going to type in Domino's and order the pizza. But I'm going to often do that through some other, I can't click on a TV, so I'm going to do a search, or I'm going to type in domino's.com, or I'm going to do something that's not clicking on the TV. So almost always, in fact, always, the user arrives to make that purchase at some other channel. So the trick is to associate the ad exposure to the outcome and then help marketers understand, is it 100% driven by the TV ad, or is it a 50-50 share with the last click? How do you do that math? So the attribution equation or attribution analytics is a big deal. And we have multiple versions of it, from super simple, which is path to purchase, ad exposure, last click, purchase, order ID, to more sophisticated, which is could be more or less, but website spike lift and purchase lift. So I deliver an ad at such and such a time, and within 30 minutes of that ad, here's your website volume and purchase volume. Within 30 minutes to 3 days afterwards, here's the impact of TV. So you see the spike, to very sophisticated approaches, which would be incrementality testing. We can do holdout groups. We can do geo splits to show that when you do TV, the incremental value of TV in terms of driving conversions is X, Y, or Z. And this can be pretty scientific. And then marketers go, okay, I get it. There's 100% correlation between, or cause and effect between, an ad viewed and a spike in volume. And then you can do that at the granular level, add exposure to individual order ID. So all of this needs to be, and this is, I think, a core differentiator and why we think we're just totally different than everyone else. You can't just trust someone to do this for you, because there's arbitrage players out there that just say, hey, we'll write our own homework, trust us. And often what they'll do is add exposure to outcome, take 100% credit. Or they'll mix in display advertising. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can happen when you can't verify it. So one of the things we've been committed to since the very beginning is radical transparency. So what that means as a platform play versus an arbitrage play is a marketer gets to see the performance, and then they can drill down to inspect it and verify it down at the log level. For example, we say Tubi drove this conversion. They can look down and see the time date stamp of when that ad or those ads were delivered connected to the outcome. And then if they wanted to, they could, and the type of ad, which is important, was it CTV or OTT? What was it? And then if they want to say, you know what, I don't want to buy Tubi anymore, they can check the box and now they're not buying Tubi. So that level of transparency and control ultimately builds trust. And then marketers, which is foundational in TV, because if you don't trust it because someone else is grading the homework and you have no transparency into what's happening, you're not going to scale your budgets because it's this new thing and you can't click on it. So that's vitally important. And then once you test, trust, then you'll scale. And we just think we're totally different on that, on all those dimensions.
The reason I'm so bullish on performance TV is because I think, generally speaking, like, we are in an outcomes era of digital advertising. Like, the reason Google and Meta have been able to build these giant businesses is because they say, just give us the money and we'll drive the outcomes you want, right? And the open web is sort of always catching up to that. I mean, yes, like the Trade Desk has built a big business doing mainly brand advertising, but it's still dwarfed, obviously, by the businesses that Google and Meta have built driving outcomes. And so I think what performance TV really represents is the opportunity to take the best historical vehicle for brand advertising, which is TV, the one that actually does drive incremental brand affinity and purchases, and to then put it into this performance framework so that advertisers are reassured, yes, tangibly that this TV ad is going to have a bigger impact than that tiny little search and social ad that, by the way, also shows up at the end of the customer journey when they've already decided they're going to purchase and they're just going to buy it anyway and need a vehicle to do so. That the TV ad is going to make a bigger impact, and we are actually going to show you that that's happening so that you can measure it, you can prove it, you're going to get promoted, and you can optimize your spend because we're making the whole thing transparent.
Yes, on all those things. The thing that's like Google and Facebook, they do what you said, which is just give us your money and we'll drive the outcomes. And while that's optically compelling, the reality is that it creates frustration because the marketer doesn't know where it's coming from. They have no control over the dials and knobs, and it's hard to trust. And it builds dependence without control, which also builds frustration. So as we're building our optimization or automatic optimization technology, we're just going to take a different approach. Yes, advanced machine learning applied to TV outcome optimization, but in the framework where all the transparency that I described earlier still persists. So yes, we're going to hit a certain ROAS number, and when we do, in a marketer, if they need to trust it or verify it so they can go to their boss with confidence, they can click on that and they can see everything that happened in that campaign. And let's say they want to override certain aspects of it. For example, they don't want to buy a certain CTV channel. They can just opt out of that. And so you get total optimization, automatic machine learning driven optimization with transparency and a level of control, which just doesn't exist with the walled gardens.
For me, the fundamental tension in digital advertising is between quality and outcomes, right? So you have this ability to drive outcomes that's amazing. It drives these, businesses worth hundreds of billions of dollars. But the nagging question for advertisers is the quality thing. It's like, okay, I know I'm getting outcomes, but are they actually quality outcomes? Like, is it actually incremental? And I think that's a way to frame the beauty of the idea of performance TV. It's essentially the synthesis of outcomes and quality, where you're saying, yes, we're going to deliver those outcomes. You're going to get your ROAS. So we're going to bring in all the performance marketers, the e-commerce folks and so on. But we are also going to show you that it is a quality incremental outcome and that you're buying the most premium inventory available in digital advertising, which is, again, CTV. Eric.
Jason, what is different about CTV than programmatic open web? Like, what are some of the dynamics that make it a different medium just from a product perspective?
Well, I think you have to start with the obvious, which I'm looking at. I have two 70-inch screens here. The form factor is just radically different. Search, and I was in the early days, it's like a small ad, and social, also a small ad. Both of those ads are sandwiched between a ton of other content that's literally designed by engineers to distract your attention. If you then compare it to like online video, it's lean back versus lean forward. The viewability factor is totally different. I think at display or video, it's 1 pixel for 1 second is equals viewable. Okay, that's totally different than how you think about viewability on TV. Right off the bat, those are the biggest: sight, sound, motion, emotion, delivered on a massive format with no other distractions, 100% viewable, 100% completion rate. I mean, you just don't get that on digital, other digital channels. You just don't. And it's going to take a while for people to really grok the obvious here, but we all grew up with TV and we know how powerful it is. We've just also been trained to think, well, it's a branding, thing. You can never measure the impact. Turns out you can. I think that's the biggest difference. Is just the form factor is amazing. And where it's going to go, the fact that you can measure outcomes, this closed loop thing is actually a big deal, because you can now, in the future of this space, aside, where we are today is one thing. Where the industry is going is creative development that's basically built and measured at the element level to drive performance. So, for example, if I'm in the Domino's commercial, I'm a male actor wearing a black shirt with glasses, we'll try that. And let's say the male actor with a black shirt with no glasses, and see the impact on performance. And let's introduce a female actor in different colors. And at the element level, you can apply all these things because you get the outcomes. You can apply the machine learning to all of them and see what combination of elements drives the superior outcome. And that's a virtuous cycle, a never-ending virtuous cycle that honestly no one's even tapped into yet. And we're just now getting to it. So huge, huge upside. And that applies, by the way, to performance advertisers and brand, because if your desired outcome, if you're Capital One, you want brand lift, that's a advertiser declared outcome. And you can measure brand lift by creative, which I'm sure they do today to some degree, but creative element, male, female, black shirt, red shirt, et cetera. So massive, massive future on programmatic TV that in my mind doesn't exist in a small screen format, a cluttered ad experience format.
Is performance just eating brand advertising? Is there an interplay? How do you think about the state of the relation between those two things?
Necessarily, just because we're a startup, we focused on performance. And there's lots of reasons for that, because we speak the performance language. Brand advertisers, it's Capital One. They have an agency of record. That agency of record, has been doing media plans, both TV and otherwise, for a long time. And their TV buying is all about reach and frequency, and they measure it. And that's like this industrial complex that's pretty calcified. I mean, it's hard to break into. So we've been focusing on performance, but you can see a world where Capital One buys at a cost per credit card acquired, or whatever they're selling, American Express or Delta Airlines, that's a cost per seat, and they measure brand lift impact as well. So I think they're two sides of the same coin, honestly, and it's just about what measurement, what side of the coin is a brand focused on or a marketer focused on, performance or brand. TV delivers both.
So the Trade Desk recently said that CTV is their largest and fastest growing channel. Obviously, we do associate the Trade Desk primarily with brand advertising, but it does beg the question, like, as performance TV becomes more established, like, will the Trade Desk will they get into performance TV? What's stopping them from doing that?
So obviously a very successful company, very capable company. They've been rewarded by the markets. So it would be odd to me if they didn't try to find a way to get into performance over time. That said, it's a totally different DNA. Like doing reach and frequency buying, where your incentive as a company is to fire more dollars through the hose because you get whatever your take rate is of it, and you have no regard for outcomes. And it's not in your platform, it's not in your language, it's not in your customer's language. It's just a very different business, and they're really good at it. But it's totally different. Like I could tell you, driving, cost per credit card acquired marketing is really hard. It's a different technology. Oftentimes these customers need account managers, the enterprise level account managers and data scientists to set this up, mainly because we're in the early days of this, but it requires handholding and a service level that probably doesn't exist with reach and frequency buying. So, there's going to be a lot of people coming into the space. Trade Desk could be one of them, but this is not easy. It's totally different. So, we'll probably have 5 years before that's an issue, and we'll be on the 5th version of our creative optimization platform by then.
Having done a bunch of work, just like looking at the DSP market this year, Trade Desk does great for brand marketing. Trade Desk does great when the goals are, reach and frequency and, on a, curated list of publishers. But, the DSP market is not dominated by Trade Desk. It's dominated by 3 companies, right? BTD, DV360, and Amazon. The latter 2 being, extremely performance focused. And then the rest of the market starts to become interesting because you've got Viant, you've got tvScientific, you've got, sort of like specialist and, vertical focused buying platforms. So if we think that the space continues to evolve towards, commerce as the next frontier of media, I would not be surprised to see market share shift accordingly, because it's moving really, really fast and you need to be on it. To Jason's point, you need to have certain things in your DNA, or you acquire your way into it. That's a different conversation.
Yeah, the Delta Airlines is a good example because they spend a lot of money, and I don't know, but I assume one of those 3 DSPs that you mentioned is one is on the reach and frequency programmatic buying end of that, and that will persist until someone at Delta Airlines realizes, through all of the trade noise and word of mouth out there, that there are other ways to buy TV that are mapped to actual outcomes like seats sold or credit card opened. So that will happen. And when that happens, they're going to pick up the phone, they're going to call the agency, and the agency is going to go, what are those words? And I think they're going to then start exploring alternatives.
In terms of big players in the industry getting into performance TV, there's just one other I want to talk about, which is actually AppLovin. Obviously, it's had a huge year. I think their stock is up like 700% year to date or year over year or something. And they've grown that business primarily on the basis of driving performance outcomes, as far as I understand. And on the most recent earnings call, someone asked Adam Froge, the CEO, about where the next room for growth for AppLovin was. And he actually sort of said, without like super dark to saying, he was like, well, we did buy Whirl, which is a CTV company, and there isn't yet like a sort of established massive player in like the performance TV space. So I could see us moving in that direction, or you could imagine we will probably move in that direction. Any reactions to that?
Obviously, they're a formidable company. A big chunk of our business is in the app growth space, so we do bump into them. And first of all, it's a big market, massive market. There's plenty of room. Secondly, the thing that we deliver that I think is just different is this level of transparency that we talked about. And in the case of app growth marketers, many of them use an MMP. AppLovin happens to own an MMP, so there's conflict there around grading your own homework. So our approach is like we're gonna do TV attribution. We lead the world in this. We're better at it than anyone, and we have patents around it, which we can talk about. And if you want to use a third-party measurement platform, whoever it is, we are going to be, like I said, total transparency and total control. We'll pipe that data to any MMP you want, and we'll optimize on their view of it. That said, we have our own view, and let us educate you why not having a device graph, for example, none of these MMPs do, is going to lead to 40% less performance for your campaign. And let's talk about that. Let's educate the market on that. I think there are fundamental differences in our approach on CTV. Like we are purpose-built for this one thing. They are not. That I would say the key difference. And it comes where the rubber hits the road on that is key items like I just referred to, having a household ID mapped to physical address with, including a device graph, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing is anytime, and this is a little more nuanced, anytime you, especially in the world of mobile, and you move into another medium like TV, the opportunity for cross-pollinating attribution is, I would just say, creates a lot of fuzziness if you're a marketer. So which highlights the absolute requirement for transparency. So a marketer can see everything that's happening. There's no cross-pollination of a $2 in-app display ad with a CTV outcome. You just can't do it in our platform because you can drill down and look at every single impression delivered associated with an outcome. In other platforms, you just can't. And I think that's going to, for the larger sophisticated marketers, which AppLovin is going to focus on, that matters a lot. That's not just me saying it, that's me echoing back what we hear from those same marketers is that level of transparency and control and singular focus on CTV, OTT, and if they want to put in other mediums, they can, but we're going to break it out in reporting and show them the impact or lack of impact on any other medium. But first and foremost, it's a big market. So in order for us to succeed and be a multi-billion-dollar company, it doesn't mean that AppLovin or Trade Desk have to fail. Plenty of room for us. And we know our lane. We've been in the same lane now for 4+ years, and we're really good at it. And we think we have a head start on all those guys on the optimization of TV outcome.
So you're 4 years in. Obviously, you've set out to create a new category in performance TV. What are some of the things you're doing to create that category, and how is that different from bringing to market? Like, let's say you were just bringing to market another SSP, right? It would be a different channel. So how do you think about creating a category specifically?
Well, a couple of lessons learned. In paid search, we ended up selling GoTo over to Yahoo for close to $2 billion. But we had built some technology and we patented around the paid search auction. That patent, basically in the form of a license, got sold to Google, and it ended up being valued at about $2 billion. So I think defining technology matters a bunch, like building real technology. Second thing is protecting that technology. And the third thing related is if you look at why Google won, they built a better mousetrap. They added in click-through rate into the scoring of, instead of just pure bid-based placement, it was bid time CTR to determine where the ad was displayed within paid search. That's just a superior model. So the lesson there is technology matters a bunch. Building a better mousetrap matters a bunch. So in TV, and then protecting it with IP. So in TV, that comes down to, our platform breaks into 3 layers. It's activate, so being able to buy programmatic TV, self-serve or managed service, and doing that efficiently. Measure, which is deterministically measuring ad exposure to outcome and then doing the attribution analytics around that. And then the third leg of the stool is optimize. Optimize, think about it. We talked about Facebook having a set it and forget it optimization paradigm. I like to think about it like we're building a self-driving car. So what that means is you first have to do it yourself. So for the first 2.5 years, we optimized every campaign by hand. Spreadsheets, quant folks, just daily optimization of campaigns to drive outcomes. You learn a lot doing that. And we launched a CPA business. We forced ourselves to get really good at it because it was our money at stake. Second, once you're done with that, you say, okay, well, let's automate this. And the first thing you do is build the data infrastructure so you can collect a lot of signal, not just campaign signals that the guys are working on with spreadsheets, but all the OpenRTB signals. And you ingest that into this data infrastructure in an automated fashion. And then the third step is start to write algorithms that takes all that data and starts to do automated things. So in the car analogy, it'd be like self-parking would be the first thing, and maybe lane change assist. And then ultimately you want to get to fully autonomous. And that's a journey, but it requires investment. And we're now launching algorithms routinely that do really cool things. Like for the same target impression, it'll find the same impression 20 to 30% lower than a human can. Or for a given number of dollars, it'll drive the maximum number of outcomes possible, all in an automated fashion. And this is going to keep evolving to where we now just, we started ingesting just whatever the campaign lever data are. Now we've ingested all of the OpenRTB fields. And then next is all the third-party data and then creative elements to optimize back to performance in a fully automated fashion. Like that's real technology and it's purpose built for CTV. I just tell you, it's category defining. And the importance of patents along the way is when you build real technology versus PowerPoint, you need to protect it, not because we're in the business of, litigating, but because it's really important down the road and away we go, right?
You're the first person in 30 episodes of Open Market that's talked about patents at all. Like I've never mentioned them, and certainly none of our CEO guests have mentioned them. What's informed your view of patents? Was it the original experience with GoTo and then seeing, how valuable those patents were? Just if we spend a minute on that, it's pretty fascinating.
The initial influence was when GoTo was sold to Yahoo, we were in litigation with Google. And that started many years before when they came down to meet with us at Overture and did a bake-off between building themselves or licensing our platform. Obviously, we knew what happened. So we were in litigation over that for a bunch of years, and Yahoo took that on as a part of the acquisition. And then they settled on the eve of Google's IPO. I don't know that I would have settled or not, but we did, and it was worth a couple $1 billion, more than the acquisition price, by the way. So that sunk in for a few reasons. One, especially in a new category. Maybe if we're in the SSP business and that's mature, maybe it's different. But in a new category, there's room for foundational patents and the foundational technologies with protected IP. In paid search, it was obviously the paid search auction. In programmatic TV, it's not buying TV. It's not buying programmatically. It's optimizing to advertiser declared outcomes. That's the magic. And that will be the long-term moat. And there's real technology behind that and real investment. And I just believe in the capitalist process, which is underpinned on innovation, which is protected by IP. And that may not be a popular sentiment today, but because there's so much litigation that has to happen to enforce it. But I fundamentally believe it. I think we, in 10 years, we could have a licensing business around all the moves that we've made. We have 6 issued patents in 4 years, pretty good, that we think are foundational in this category.
That's so fascinating. Joe, we talk about all the elements of company building. And, if you're building like a real technology business, this is a big element of company building. We could probably do a whole episode on this. Jason, we might have you back at some point to talk about it. We should.
If you're building an arbitrage business, you're not patenting technology.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think what you're really seeing is Jason's philosophy as a CEO and founder, which is to start with a genuinely differentiated and proprietary technology, right? That is the foundation of a new category. And that matches the scale of the vision, which we spoke about at the beginning, with the actual product. And then, the marketing and the sales, like selling that vision seems to come secondary from that. Whereas some people are sort of, sheer brute force, like marketing and sales driven. And that's often the case in ad tech, especially because sometimes it has to be, because as Jason's implying, like if your technology isn't meaningfully differentiated, you have to win on marketing and sales.
Yeah. And then, really, I want to arm our sales team with, okay, door number 1, 2, or 3 is kind of PowerPoint and claims, and let's talk real technology and what that means to you, because it's meaningless unless it can perform, some magic. In the case of paid search and Google, it was obvious. I mean, it was a superior model because it delivered better outcomes and more outcomes to advertisers. Same thing here. Any of this stuff we've just talked about is totally meaningless unless it drives, self-evident value to our customers, which is ultimately the business we're in. And it's a trick because you can deliver value to customers and they don't know it or they don't believe it. Then you're kind of you're lost. So you've got to deliver the value and do it in a way that's self-evident for marketers of all sophistication levels, from simple, I'm a pizza store, to, the largest game growth app marketer out there.
Back to this idea of category defining, category creating. That was like a fascinating trip towards, foundational technology and patents. Is there anything from like a marketing, a go-to-market, a sales perspective that, you're thinking about, again, because it's an emergent category, not just a startup company?
I try to surround myself with experts on this, present company included. It's an evolving technology or evolving skill set of how to get the message out there. And I'm still, I don't claim to be best in class at this. there are other people in this category that are really good at marketing, but don't have technology. So, or don't have the depth of technology we have, which is frustrating to me because you get customers who believe that because of the marketing, and that demonstrates in itself the value of marketing. There's something to be done here, and we can definitely improve on it.
This is where we get into the section where you can help diagnose and give some roadmaps. So presented with a situation like this, where you've got a competitive set that's noisy and could be potentially smoke and mirrors versus real technology, like real IP. What do you think about from a marketing perspective to help a company in the latter close that gap? I put him on the spot.
Well, I think we've acknowledged it, but with tvScientific, it's actually not what it is with most of the CEO founders we have on, where it's about messaging and positioning. I actually think, as Jason said, this is a very unusual startup in that for 4 or 5 years, it's had the same primary vision, which is to create the performance TV category and move potentially, hundreds of billions of dollars of advertising spend from search and social, which are, plateauing performance categories, to TV, which is historically the dominant brand channel and will become a performance channel. That is a great vision. That's a great message. Creating the performance TV category is it's compelling. I think it feels almost inevitable to people who understand the industry. tvScientific, obviously, 4 years in, at this point, you have e-commerce advertisers who have sort of validated that vision, and now it's a matter of scaling it. What Jason needs to do, and I know you know this, Jason, is now it's about telling everyone about that, right? It's you have competitors who you view as having inferior technology, but who are very loud, and you can't be mad about that. The only way to counterbalance it is to be as loud as they are. And so, Jason a couple weeks ago did a post on the Trade Desk's tvOS, and it was huge. It was ad tech viral. Got almost 400 reactions, and I'm sure tens of thousands of views. And that is how you bring performance TV to the next level, is you situate it within the overall developments of the industry. And you say, as I would put it, we're in the outcomes era, and performance TV is the movement driven by tvScientific and its proprietary technology that will bring TV into the outcomes era. And, a category worth hundreds of billions of dollars will result. We just got to tell the people.
Got it. All right, great. This has been awesome. I'm exhausted. You're so intense, dude.
It's not the first time I've heard that. I'm not self-aware about it though. It's just how I am, I guess.
Yeah, Jason's here's how it is. And he's walking you through the technical machinations of the thing. Whereas I'm intense in the marketing way, which is here's the big vision and we're throwing a verbal party and whatever. But it's a good combination. You need the duality of those folks.
Yeah, to be clear, I was talking to Jason. You make my brain sweat, I think, when I talk to you, and that's a huge compliment. This has been great. Thank you so much for your time, man. I know as a CEO of a startup, you got a million things going on, but we appreciate it, and I'm sure the listeners will as well.
Great. Thank you for having me on. It was a great combo.
Thanks for listening to Open Market. Performance TV, tvScientific, you heard it here. Jason will be out on LinkedIn, so you can yell at him in the public square, yell at us in the public square. We'd love to hear you. And thanks very much.
Bye-bye, everybody.